Welcome to the Resilience series. I'm Stephanie Weaver, author of the brand new Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which has a theme of resilience. My guest today is Marivi Soliven. Marivi is a Tagalog translator, activist, and writer. She's the author of 17 books, and her novel, The Mango Bride, won grand prize at the Palanca Awards, which is the Philippine equivalent of the Pulitzer. It is now being made into a movie. Welcome, Marivi.
For having me, Stephanie. It's so nice to see you in your new place.
Yes, this is the new office. So let's start with your work as a translator. What organization do you work for, and how often and when do you get called in to translate?
I actually work for several interpreting services. I would say about six at this point. And so I do telephonic services, interpreting services for four of them. So I'm constantly logged on. And as soon as one call comes in from one company, I log off the other three. And then about once a week, several times a month, I get called to do on-site interpretation. So I can go to an old folks home or hospital, whatever they require, a school, and I do like face-to-face interpretation. And then sometimes I also do like they call it video remote interpretation, where we're like this on Zoom.
Got it. So, how has your work as a translator informed your activism?
Well, it definitely taught me a lot about domestic violence, which inspired the Mango Bride, because right around the time that the subprime mortgage crisis happened in 2008, I noticed a sudden uptick in calls from the National Domestic Violence Hotline and women's shelters. And a social worker finally explained to me that anytime there is like any kind of crisis, like the Exxon Valdez spill, or some kind of problem with the economy, domestic violence tends to rise. So, in the same way, it has risen with the COVID crisis because suddenly you're stuck at home quarantining with your abuser instead of having that 8 hour space where you are separated and off to your own individual jobs. So, yeah, so to make a long story short, the interpreting has affected my thoughts on how the immigrant community is dealing with things and giving me a closer idea of how people in crisis are dealing with their, a nationwide, a worldwide crisis, essentially. So apart from domestic violence, once the COVID crisis began, I estimate that I must be doing at least one end of life call a month. So if my math is right, that's at least 40 people that I've had to attend to at close to to the ends of their lives. And it's heartbreaking. And I wrote a story about that. That story was also turned into a short film, Pandemic Bread, which was filming recently concluded. And Zainabu Davis, the director, hopes to submit it to Sundance. So hopefully it'll all work and we'll screen there as well.
That's so exciting to have two film projects based on your work, and that is an incredible. We'll post the link in the comments to that story, which you can read online. It's a beautiful, beautiful essay. So, how else do these stories show up in your writing life? I guess is the question.
Well, they're basically the stories I write about. Obviously, because of like HIPAA laws and everything, I changed the personalities. I don't even remember the names of the people I interpret for because I write everything on a whiteboard, and as soon as I hang up, I erase everything. So there is no written record of them until I remember the conversations, at least the most striking ones, and I write about them. And as I said, as an immigrant myself, with the advantage of being fluent in both English and Tagalog, I've been able to navigate the immigrant experience with a much more ease, I would say, than those who come and they're barely fluent in English and they don't know how the system works. And so they really do need an interpreter is not an advocate, but they really do need someone to literally explain in their mother tongue how things work with social security and auto insurance and the medical system, diagnoses, procedures, everything, really.
Yeah, and which is complicated enough for those of us who are native English speakers and live here. I mean, it's just such a crazy, terrible system to begin with. So I can only
Yeah.
imagine how challenging it would be, especially when you come from a different country where things work differently and you maybe have different expectations of how things should work, and yet that's not how it is here. I would imagine it would just feel sort of impenetrable without your assistance. So that's it's great to hear, but also I can see how challenging that would be. So 2 years before your exciting movie deal came together, you found out that your publisher was letting your award-winning book, The Mango Bride, go out of print. Tell us about that.
Well, despite my best efforts to promote the book and talk about the book and put myself on a self-funded author's tour, a book tour, which actually made it through 17 cities across the country. I would send copies of my book to all my friends across the country and I would tell them, if you like the book, would you please help me host or would you organize a book event in your city? And I would go there on my own steam, and sometimes frequently I would cook for the book event because nothing happens in Filipinos unless you have food included. So through that, every time, and then I would bring my books, like I like to call myself like a vacuum cleaner salesman. And I would bring my books, I would sell out at every event. But clearly, I mean, if your publisher isn't making sure that Barnes and Noble at the time or any of the other stores are stocked with copies of your books, if they don't put them in that round table that you see as you enter the store, which I recently learned, you actually have to pay the store extra money to get that prime spot of real estate in a bookstore, then really there are like so many other books that are just as good as yours. And nobody's going to riffle through like the racks and look for yours. So, absent that kind of support from my publisher, it was almost inevitable that it was not going to succeed. So I came within, I don't know, a few $100s of earning back my advance. And because of that, Penguin Random House was like, yeah, okay, we're done. I don't think we need to do a second printing. So to be rejected by the biggest publisher in the world was, I think, heartbreaking to me. But then there was nothing I could do until Jennifer Coburn, the author of the upcoming Cradles of the Reich, a wonderful woman and very enterprising writer, advised me. She's like, don't cry over this. You can just self-publish it on Kindle and all the royalties will be yours. And it took me a couple of years to get that together. And I did. And so it's been wonderful. I feel like I have my own agency. And so that's just one part of the story. So Penguin drops me, and my then literary agent, Jill Marshall, who was, you know, a very good like touter of my work, kind of ran out of steam trying to find a publisher for my second novel. So when I saw that she was kind of a whole other ordeal, because it led me on I like to call it the querying Calvary, because I then went off and was rejected by almost 100 other literary agents when I showed them my second novel. But I recently got picked up by this wonderful literary agent at Inkwell Management. Her name is Maria Whelan, and she is so enthusiastic about my second novel. It's called Taxi Dancer, that I'm hopeful that she will find a home for it. Meantime, 2 years after The Mango Bride went out of print, my former agent was kind enough to forward to me an email from a producer who I didn't know from Adam, and she sounded really excited about, turning it into a film. And I was like, well, this is not my first rodeo. I had this conversation with multiple people, and the last one lasted a whole 7 years without any kind of like option payment or formal contract signed. And, I'm just done with that conversation because I don't believe anything anymore. And that novel is dead. But Micah Tadena, with at the time 108 Media, was so persistent, and she proceeded to set up a series of Zoom calls. And over last year, she assembled a team. She managed to get what they call the megastar in the Philippines, Sharon Cuneta. to star in and executive produce the film adaptation. And over time, we also managed to get Martin Edralin, who is the fabulous director of several films, including Islands. And we got Ray Red, who is also a director, screenwriter, to write the screenplay. So at this point, the novel is the film adaptation is in process. The screenplay is done, and we're going through auditions. And we really hope we can begin filming sometime next year in Manila and the Bay Area.
So the reason I wanted to have you on the show is partly because I follow you. We know each other. Mango Bride is an incredible novel. For those of you who are on the fence at this stage about whether you should buy it, you totally should get it. It's so rich and compelling and sad, but really takes you into that immigrant experience. And I think even today, it's probably even more relevant than when I read it a couple of years ago, because of all of the freedoms that are being rolled back for women in this country.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is being in the writing community. The holy grail is get an agent and get a big 5 publishing deal. And you had both of those things. And it wasn't that, finish line thing, right? I mean, you still self-funded a book tour, and, you didn't make back your advance, which is way more common than making back your advance. That's not a critique at all. It's most people don't ever make back their advance. And for those of you watching who have no idea what I'm talking about, authors are paid an upfront fee based on how well the publisher thinks their book is going to sell. And if you make enough money to cover that fee, then authors start getting royalties. But I think it's like only 20% of authors ever make back their advance. So a lot of the publishers are, it's basically sort of a casino royale for them. Like, they're trying to decide which books are going to sell. And a lot of it also has to do with the climate when the book comes out. Like, certain books might just hit at the right time. And maybe if this book was coming out now with all the focus on own voices stories, it might be different. You just don't know. It's not the quality of the book.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk with you because it is a very particular kind of resilience and persistence that writers have to have. This wasn't your first book. This was your 17th book, right? And or your 16th book. And so, you've been through it. It's not like you're not a professional writer and you don't understand it, or, your work isn't of the right quality. So what do you think is it in you that keeps you going on this writing path, which has been so challenging?
Honestly, I think I'm really only good at 3 things. And that's, I mean, totally honest. And that's writing, cooking, and enabling shopping. It's like I can really enable a person to shop well. So if I took away the writing, I mean, I guess I could just be a really good cook, one of like 10 gajillion other good cooks who have cooking shows and whatever. And when I can't write a good sentence in a day, I will make a good meal. I believe that both efforts are creative endeavors. And so if you can't create on the page, you can create in the kitchen. That's my theory. So I do that. And obviously I'm not going to shop all day. So I just had to keep going, because what else am I going to do? I mean, this is who I am. It's been who I am since I was 11. And whether or not I get published, I will continue to write, because I don't know who it was who said it, but some very wise person said once, how you live every day is who you are. And what you do and what I do is I write, I mean, I would love to be known as a good cook. And I think I am among friends, but who cares? I mean, no one is going to read no one is going to eat all my meals, just close friends and family. And I have, I've just recently been on Facebook, where my very first book, which was published in 1993. It was published in 1993. And I have people, it was a children's book called The Unicorn. And I have people who talk about having that book when they were young and growing up and becoming mothers and grandmothers and passing that book on to their children and grandchildren. So I think the life of a book is long. and you never know who's going to pick them up and where it's going to end up. But I find that better than making a meal, which has its own merit, writing a good story and having people read it and having it resonate with them is just, it's just a lovely thing, even if you never met them. And in the case of the Mango Bride, I have to say, why I became like an advocate for survivors of domestic violence was all these women started to write to me, people I didn't know. Well, one person I didn't even remember, who used to be my undergrad student when I taught at the university. And that person said that Beverly's story of domestic violence was her own lived experience, and she was in a better place now. But because I had such an outpouring of like, women saying that they had gone through this, I felt that I needed to do something. So I established with Susan Macbeth the Saving Beverly fundraiser, literary fundraiser. The former American ambassador to the Philippines, Harry Thomas Jr., came and gave the keynote speech, and we raised enough money to save 9 women from their abusive marriages and gain them residency in the United States. So I think the last woman, this was in 2014. So I believe the last of the 9 women we saved has attained like American citizenship and a divorce, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what does resilience look like for you as an activist, a Filipina American, and a writer? Does each aspect of your life require different types of resilience, do you think, or is it all kind of rolled up together?
Well, I think it's if a ball could have facets, it would be different facets of the same ball. So if you're knocked down creative wise, then you bounce back up on that one particular facet of yourself, and you just, you don't always dust yourself up. Sometimes it takes a good stiff drink to do that, and maybe an hour of yoga, not in that order. And then you just get started again, and you say, well, it's not so bad, I can revise that novel a ninth time, all 90,000 words. And you just have to keep at it. But you also have to believe that this is what you want to do, because otherwise, there's no point. There are any number of things you could do, not happily, but yeah, you just have to commit to yourself to it. So I think the only kind of resilience I need besides writing is rolling with the punches with what's going on with the country right now, with the repeal of Roe versus Wade, with the re-election, or not the or the election of the son of the dictator in the Philippines. Like it feels like, and all of these mass shootings, it feels like every day brings another horror. And you just have to find a way to accept it and see what else you can do to make things better in your own small way. One thing I did for the Trump Biden election 2 years ago was I joined with Next Gen America. And for them, they were like, their mandate was, we just need to get the millennials out to vote, because that age group is the least likely to come out and vote because they're busy, they're students. Sometimes they'll be first time voters. And how they did it was they would give us rolls of voters were registered, and we would text to them. And so I must have texted thousands of people all across the country, especially the southern states. And I like to think that we got the vote out there, and that helped Biden win. And I feel if I can do that, I feel like, okay, so maybe the future right now looks bad, but we're gonna keep slugging away at what sucks. I think my one of my favorite sayings by the one of the presidents, a former president of Estonia, was today is shit. But the present is shit, but it is fertilizer tomorrow. So however bad things look, we might be in the shits today, but that's growing our future, and we need to make hay with it. you know.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So this is the last question I ask everyone, and I love the question because I always get a different answer. So what are some self-care resilient strategies that you personally find most helpful?
I try to do yoga every day. I try to write one good sentence at least a day. I try to be grateful. And generally, I owe myself like one good cocktail a day. If I've done all of the first things, then I deserve that one thing. And I don't always get to it, but I try. Yeah. So keeping a good routine and knowing that you can be grateful for other things, even though the things that you seem to think matter at this point are not going well. As long as you keep that in mind, there's always other things to be grateful for. That's what keeps me going.
That's great. Marivi, thank you again for being here today and sharing your story. Please visit marivisoliven.com to learn more about her work. You can buy her books, Spooky Mo and The Mango Bride, on Kindle, where she will make all the royalties. So go do that right now, folks, on Amazon. Check out other episodes of the Resilient series on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Follow me at SWeaverMPH to learn more about my new cookbook, the Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook. Thanks so much for watching.